So Nintendo did release their financial earnings report to investors. As we kind of talked about, they were going to do that late last night for me, but mid-morning in Japan. They released it, and surprise, surprise, Nintendo made a bunch of money, right? Go figure. But they did move quite a few Switch units. They actually moved more than I predicted. I said like 16.8 million. They eclipsed that by just about a million, almost a million units. So they did pretty well. We're going to take a look at all of that. And then they also gave us a forecast for this year that we're in now, this fiscal year, which will end next March, at the end of March, so March 31st, 2019. That fiscal quarter will end the entire year. So we're going to talk about how this year was, what they, how much it was that they, like the money that they made, revenue, profit. We'll go over all of that, and then we're also going to take a look at the hardware numbers and software numbers. So let's start with the hardware numbers. Now, we really don't have to worry about two systems. The Wii U is pretty much forgotten about. They did still list some games that sold, believe it or not, still on the Wii U. But we're going to just go with the Switch and the 3DS here. As you can see, the Nintendo Switch hardware, 17.79 million have shipped. They can generally only track shipped units because once it leaves their warehouse and they get money for it, that's what they count it as. And of course, they can't really go to the store, every store, and check to see how many have sold there. They just count usually shipped amounts. They can give us sell-through amounts later on as well when they get those reports back from retailers. But for now, they gave us the ship numbers of 17.79 million units. And then they also gave us the software amount that they have shipped, 68.97 million units. That does include digital and everything, so those they can track in real time. It's more the brick and mortar store sales that they have a harder time with. The 3DS is up to 72.53 million units, and the software is now at 364.89 million units. That's a lot of software, by the way, for a system to sell. So the 3DS did well, even if they're ramping it down now, which it appears with their forecast of about 4 million units going forward in the next fiscal year. This looks pretty good for them for an entire system's lifespan, and if it does end up reaching 80 million, I think that's pretty successful with all of the cell phones around that are kind of eating up that part of the market. So overall net sales came to 9.66 billion. That's for the fiscal year to date. For that entire fiscal year, it's a 115% increase year over year, kind of as we'd expect, because that what we just talked about was the first full year of the Switch in a fiscal year, and of course the 3DS did decline some, so it's also battling against the Pokemon and stuff like that released that year. But good, 115% increase year over year. Operating income was up a lot, actually, 1.62 billion, which was 504% increase year over year, and they ended up with a profit of $1.28 billion. That's in USD. That's a 36% increase year over year from last fiscal year. Now I'm showing you some of the hardware here. We also have to remember the Super Nintendo Classic. That actually topped 5.28 million units life to date, and that is massive. They also said they had an 87% increase year over year for Switch digital sales. Makes sense. Obviously, there's a lot more out there in terms of what to buy on the marketplace, but the hardware numbers here reflect a 2.92 million jump for this past quarter, and that means that in that fiscal year, they ended with 15.05 million units. Remember, that March when it launched, that was the end of that fiscal year, so we're not going to count those units, but overall, obviously, 17.79 million life to date. Now let's jump over to software and take a look at some of the individual titles that they did outline for us. Super Mario Odyssey, 10.41 million. That's not as much of a jump as I thought there would be. There does seem to be a bit of a tailing off right now for Mario Odyssey. The big introduction period of that, obviously, where it came out and then it sold crazy numbers. Remember, like 9 million, like super fast. It's going to happen as everyone has bought it, but as more Switch users start to jump on board, when they buy it, they'll probably either buy Mario Odyssey or Mario Kart or Zelda. Those are probably the ones they're going to pick from. Speaking of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, let's jump down to that 9.22 million, which means it did pass Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, a game that had a massively successful attach rate. This one is going to continue selling, by the way. I do think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe will become the best-selling Switch game when it's probably the next quarter or two. It appears to be selling faster than Mario Odyssey right now, so don't be surprised if maybe not the next quarter, but the quarter after, we see Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at the top. That is, of course, unless we get to a point where Pokemon comes out, that could easily jump to 15 million like it does on the 3DS pretty easily. Breath of the Wild, 8.48 million pieces. That is the best-selling Zelda game of all time now, especially if you include the Wii U versions. It's definitely the best-selling one now. And the last one that was up there was Twilight Princess. So this is now not only like one of the highest rated Zeldas, obviously, as we've seen. Some people say it is the best Zelda game. That is, to me, Link to the Past still, but that's just me. But tons of success here, as we've seen. Best-selling Zelda game now to date, as long as you don't count remasters. Even if you count remasters, though, this one will be crossing that, and that generally includes things like Ocarina of Time remaster that came out. That added up is over 10 million, so don't be surprised if this one ends up crossing that next quarter. It won't be long. 1-2 Switch, 2.29 million, a little surprise there, and then Splatoon 2, over 6 million units have sold there. Obviously, the updates and everything that they've done to continue the interest in that game has really helped. Japan has really helped that game as well. ARMS at 1.85 million. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, 1.31. Not a lot of sales there for it, but it is more of a niche game. It's a JRPG. I've told you guys before, JRPGs don't sell a ton, but this is still pretty good for that type of game. Kirby Star Allies, which had maybe 2.5 weeks recorded, 1.26 million units for that, which is great. It definitely, I think, sold the best in Japan, but obviously we saw it chart in the NPDs pretty high up there, actually, number 4. So yeah, Kirby did well also. Overall, a very successful quarter, a very successful fiscal year for Nintendo with the Switch. That was its first full fiscal year. They crushed their expectations. Remember, they originally set them at like 10 million, and then they ended up raising them up and then raising them up to like 15. They still got just past 15 million. So they have done well here when it comes to beating their expectations that they had. But here's the thing. They put a forecast out for the fiscal year that we are now in. And this is where it starts to raise some flags, because now we're trying to figure out, what does Nintendo have planned? The obvious answer is Pokemon, but they are saying they expect to ship 20 million Switch units. That's not like with the last ones added, so that's 17.79 million. No. That means that by the end, by this time next year, I'll be telling you guys they have shipped 37.79 million at minimum. At minimum, which is absolutely insane. They have to have something up their sleeve. They have to have some big announcements. We've heard somewhat, obviously, with things like Pokemon, which, by the way, that is still 2018 or later on their investors briefing. I know a lot of us were hoping they would change it, but this means that there still might not be sure if it is coming out this year, 2018 specifically, and I don't know if they want to launch it early 2019, or maybe they're still just trying to keep it under wraps until they have a big reveal at E3, although I feel like, especially with the new CEO jumping on board here, they would want to make a big splash. That's the easy way to do it, but we'll see where we go from here with Pokemon. I do still think it's coming this year, though, especially with 20 million Switch units being shipped. And then they also gave us another very telling forecast. 100 million software units is what they expect to ship this fiscal year. That's not including what we just talked about, over 60 million pieces there. No. 100 million more software units is what they expect to ship. So they're not telling us the whole story right now. They could have an Animal Crossing, which while it's not, like I said, it's not a Pokemon, but it still sells well. It still sells a ton of units, and it worked really well with the Switch crowd, absolutely. So we're looking for some big stuff right now. Bayonetta 3 Bayonetta 3 is not the big stuff. It's not going to sell a ton, but it would still contribute probably at least 2 million to that, right, in the fiscal year, depending on when it launches. Pokemon is the big one. That's the one that I think most of us point to and say, okay, that's going to sell well. There's also Retro Studios game, right? We don't know what's happening there.Maybe they even have another Donkey Kong game kind of lined up, as we heard of them do the Donkey Kong Instagram post where they said there's no 2 without 3. So you never know. This could happen. They could have a lot of stuff to reveal at E3. We know about Yoshi, Fire Emblem's coming. There's a lot of software to pick from there, and then we don't even know about the third-party offerings. What if that Fortnite rumor turns out to be true? Fortnite shows up, it's free to play. Oh, wow. I guess I'll get that Switch now. Or maybe Grand Theft Auto 5 shows up. There's a lot of stuff, I'm telling you guys, we don't know about, and it's going to be packed into E3 pretty seriously, because Pokemon, I have a feeling, will be revealed outside of E3, because that's usually like how they like to do it. I would expect before E3, and then maybe E3 has some Pokemon theme kind of around it. But I look at these reports, and I have to say they did very, very good here. The big test for them is still what happens this fiscal year, because they're not going to be comparing themselves to a year without the Switch anymore. They're going to be comparing themselves to the first year of the Switch, which had an amazing lineup, right? Great sales. Things were flying off the shelves. So they're going to continue to try to build on it. But here's the question. Can they compete with themselves from the Switch's first year? That's my question for you guys. Can they? Can they beat that Switch's first year with games like Zelda Breath of the Wild, right? Games like Mario Odyssey, Xenoblade, a brand new IP with ARMS. There's a lot of stuff there to like. Even Kirby technically made it out in the first fiscal year. So what do you guys think about this? How would they compete with that? Is Pokemon pretty much the big answer? Is it Pokemon or bust to get to those expectations of 20 million Switch units? That's so many, and 100 million pieces of software. I have to know from you guys about this. Let me know down below. Also, let me know what you think about really just the report in general. Were there any games on the list that surprised you? Were you surprised that Kirby jumped up pretty quick in 2.5 weeks? I mean, seriously, it came out midway through March, and it's coming up on Xenoblade Chronicles 2 already. I want to hear from you guys about that. And then what about the hardware sales? What about the Super Nintendo Classic being over 5 million units? Is that surprising because you can't seem to find one, but it sounds like they're out there selling like crazy? Let me know down below, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you liked the video if you enjoyed it, guys. Disliked it if not. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next time.